All right, let's get right into it. There's been a massive military operation against Iran. And at first, the reports claimed this overwhelming, incredible success. But what happens after the bombs fall? That's what we're breaking down today. The official assessment of this campaign and, the much more complicated reality that started to emerge from all that smoke. So the first reports that came out from U.S. Central Command, they painted this picture of just decisive, powerful action. The main message was super clear. The damage done to Iran by U.S. and Israeli strikes was, well, in a word, massive. But then, as the dust started to settle, that simple story began to crack. It became pretty obvious that, yeah, the tactical wins were huge, but the real strategic headaches, they were just beginning. Okay, so first things first, let's dig into the actual numbers from that initial military report just so we can wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this thing. U.S. Central Command reported that the total number of targets hit inside Iran was, get this, over 7,800. That is just an absolutely massive number, and it really tells you how wide-ranging this campaign was. And this wasn't just a land-based operation. The strikes hammered Iran's navy, too. We're talking more than 120 of their ships sunk or disabled. So yeah, this was a full-on assault on their military capabilities, everywhere. But where this really hit home was on Iran's ability to strike back. The assessment claims that somewhere between 260 and 300 of their ballistic missile launchers were just neutralized. Now, to put that into perspective for you, that's a whopping 60 to 70% of their entire arsenal. Just gone, taken right off the board. And this really shows you the deeper strategy here. I mean, it wasn't just about blowing up missiles. It was about taking apart the entire system that lets them launch those missiles. Air defenses, wiped out. Radar systems, neutralized. They even used these massive 5,000-pound bunker busters to hit sites buried deep underground. The big takeaway here is pretty clear. This was all about clearing a path, making any future operations a whole lot easier. Now, it wasn't just about the hardware, right? The strikes also went after the people in charge. The goal wasn't just to disarm the regime. It was to, well, cut the head off the snake. One of the key figures they mentioned was Esmaeil Khatib, who was Iran's intelligence minister. He was killed in the strikes, and the report described him as a central player in plots against American officials. So that just goes to show you how precise and targeted this operation really was. And this led the analysts in the source material to ask a really blunt question. With so many of the top dogs gone, who's actually left to even make the calls? And boom, this is where the whole story starts to shift, because despite all these successes, a big warning came out. It was from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, during a briefing. And she basically said, look, if the regime survives this, they are absolutely going to start a years-long mission to rebuild every single thing they've lost. So that phrase, a years-long effort, that really brings the focus right back home. And it raises some pretty serious questions about whether we have the stamina for a long, drawn-out conflict. The analysis points to, two ticking clocks here. First, there's public support. It's always strong when a conflict kicks off, right? But it almost always fades the longer things drag on. And second, the economy. The source material makes a great point. Iran knows that its best weapon now is to cause long-term pain for us through high energy prices. So you've got this threat of a long fight and the possibility of support fading away at home. And that brings us to a whole bunch of really big strategic questions that those early reports of mission accomplished just don't answer. All right, question number 1. It's about a critical economic choke point. The U.S. military budget is over $1 trillion, so why isn't the Strait of Hormuz open yet? Did we maybe underestimate Iran's ability to threaten that vital shipping lane? And that leads us to the biggest issue of all, the nuclear threat. The analysis asks a really fundamental question. What does victory even look like here? I mean, at what point can anyone actually declare the threat is gone and say, okay, we're done? And from there, man, the potential problems just start to stack up. To find Iran's enriched uranium, are we going to need to put boots on the ground? What about the continued Israeli strikes on Hezbollah? Could that trigger a massive refugee crisis? What happens if, down the road, U.S. and Israeli goals don't line up anymore? And maybe the biggest question of all, will the politics of the upcoming midterm elections start to dictate military strategy? And all of this, it brings us right back to the central idea. The initial military strike, it did incredible damage, no doubt about it. But, as the source points out, our history with long conflicts, like in Iraq and Afghanistan, well, that casts a pretty long shadow.
So the final, most important question is this. With this mountain of unknowns, will our patience for the long, hard road ahead just run out?